You've probably heard about human sacrifices, chocolate, and warriors dressed like jaguars. But the real story? It's darker, messier, and far less survivable. Because for all its grandeur, the Aztec world wasn't built for comfort. It was built for endurance, for devotion, and for war. So before you get comfortable, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always wild to see where in the world we're all watching history unfold together. Now dim the lights, maybe grab a warm drink, or wrap yourself in a blanket like it's a feathered cloak of a Mexican noble. Because you're about to wake up in the heart of Tenochtitlan. The year is 1487. And no, you wouldn't survive a day. Congratulations. You opened your eyes, and you are now in the 15th century. The sun is rising over Tenochtitlan, and you are still alive. This is a miracle in itself, because living in the Aztec Empire isn't synonymous with survival. It's a kind of historical survival game where you're trying to make it through a calendar day. And here's a hint. There's no easy mode. The first thing you feel is a foggy, stuffy air and mud, because you're lying on the ground, on a hard mat. A pillow? That's a luxury. A blanket? A slightly thicker covering made of reed mats. The thing you're sleeping on is so uncomfortable that even a rock would feel more comfortable than a bed. But the problem isn't the bed. The problem is the familiar sound that wakes you up in the morning. The clanging of pots and pans, the grinding of a corn grinder, and in the background, your mother's voice shouting, "Get up, the sun is rising." Of course, she's saying it in Nahuatl. You don't understand the language, but the tone is universal. Get up. Tenochtitlan is an island city in the middle of Lake Mexico. Yes, you live in a city that floats on water. The roads are muddy, the streets are narrow, but it's an architectural marvel, crisscrossed by canals, with neat sidewalks and floating agricultural islands called chinampas, where food is grown. So there's no Amazon, but fresh vegetables are guaranteed. Come on, get up. You'd better hurry, because you're a 16-year-old child from a farming family. And today, before you go to the cornfield, there's a ceremony. Yes, everything begins with the gods. Are you hungry? Never mind. Pray first. The morning ceremony takes place in the miniature altar corner of the house. Incense is burned. Cocoa is offered to the gods. Yes, you give the cocoa from your breakfast to the gods because the gods are always hungry, especially the sun god Huitzilopochtli. He needs to get his morning energy. Otherwise, the world could stop. Incidentally, it is believed that blood must be shed every day for the sun to rise again. That is why the Aztecs keep track of time with sacrifices rather than a calendar. That is why you are anxious when you pray. Whose turn is it? You go outside. The sounds of the city greet you. Drums, flutes, vendors, the shrill calls of priests. The people around you are dressed in colorful fabrics with bird feathers on their heads. But you are a disappointment. Your clothes are made of coarse cotton, beige in color. You don't understand fashion because you were taught to pay taxes, not to follow fashion. Your feet are bare. Yes, you have no shoes, because shoes are only for the nobles. You are a child of the cornfields. Your status is evident in your bare feet. Be careful as you walk, because there are no llamas on the street, but there could be crocodiles. You are on the edge of a canal, after all. Breakfast? Breakfast is a piece of tortilla, some mashed beans, avocado if you have it. If not, pray. You eat corn. Yes, corn. Every meal, every dish is corn. For the Aztecs, corn is not just food. It's a sacred entity. They say humans were created from corn. So eating corn is like worshiping God. By the way, don't mention things like gluten intolerance like modern people do. You'll look ridiculous. Here, it's not intolerance. It's hunger. Now, before you go to work, you need to stop by the market. Your mother asked you to get incense, salt, and dried chili peppers. The market, tianguis, is the heart of this place. There's no money, only bartering. In one hand, you hold 2 handfuls of dried tomatoes. In the other, hope. The market has everything: frog skin, cocoa beans, jade stones, even live birds, and of course, no human hearts. Those are only in the temple, not yet. The market is colorful, fragrant, but dangerous, because there are pickpockets. Yes, Aztec pickpockets. But if they get caught, the punishment is simple: slavery. As he continues on his way, he catches sight of the great temple, Templo Mayor. It is a massive pyramid. It is dedicated to 2 main gods, Huitzilopochtli, god of war and the sun, and Tlaloc, god of rain. The steps are steep, and there is a platform at the top. What happens on that platform? Sacrifice. The kind of sacrifice you know, human sacrifice. A priest, his face painted with blood, an obsidian knife in his hand, shouts. The victim is brought up, his chest is cut open, his heart is removed. While it is still beating, it is offered to the god. You watch from below. Just another day. Shocked? Everyone here is. Because being sacrificed isn't a punishment, it's an honor. If blood isn't offered to Huitzilopochtli, the sun won't rise. And if the sun doesn't rise, the universe collapses. No one wants that, right? After this scene, you try to go to work, but your mind is a little confused. Why? Because you heard that the next victims are volunteers. Yes, volunteers. Some are willing to be sacrificed to ascend to the realm of the gods. Because in Aztec culture, death is not the end. It is the beginning of a new form. If you die in battle or in the temple, VIP immortality awaits you, but you're not a warrior. Not yet. Maybe one day you'll join the jaguar warriors. Until then, you're in the cornfield. You go out to work. You walk along the canal. The surroundings are lush green. Even when the sun is high, the city is cool because it's on a lake. But the mosquitoes. Oh, those mosquitoes. Aztec mosquitoes are 300% more aggressive than their modern counterparts. And no, there's no mosquito repellent. When you arrive at the field, what awaits you is corn, corn, and more corn. You dig the soil with a tool made of reeds. Your hands are calloused. Your back aches. But that's how the day goes. Because here, work is a form of worship. Is the work done? Not yet. On your way back, you stop by the altars and light some incense. Because everything is connected to the gods. If it doesn't rain, the harvest will burn. If the harvest burns, you'll go hungry. If you go hungry, you'll move up the list of sacrifices. Evening is falling. You return home. Your mother is waiting for you. Dinner is ready. Tortillas again, some soup, again with corn, and maybe a surprise tonight. Aztec chocolate. But it's not sweet. It's spicy, bitter, and dark. Not sweet. More like liquid anger. The silence of the night is broken by the priest's prayers, the crackling of the fire in the temple, and the croaking of frogs. You are tired, but alive. That counts as a success. You return to your bed. The hardness of the mat no longer matters. Your back throbs. Your feet are covered in mud. As your eyes close, your last thought is, will I still be alive when I wake up in the morning? This is a normal day for the Aztecs. Do you still want to return to modern life? It's midday. The sun is high. The air is heavy. The streets of Tenochtitlan shimmer like mirages. But there's no stopping. Because midday isn't just time for food. It's also a time for discipline, justice, and settling accounts with the gods. You've returned from the fields in the morning, hoping for a moment's rest at home. Your mother greets you with a bowl of water. Water is important because drinking canal water could send you straight to the afterlife. Purification? Number prayer. You sit down and eat tortillas. There's also bean soup. Today is a luxurious day because your neighbor gave you corn flour as a gift in honor of his newborn lambs. This is neighborhood solidarity. But be careful. Don't get too close, because the wrong look can turn into an accusation of witchcraft. And witchcraft is punishable by death among the Aztecs. As you eat, a sound rises from outside. Drums, hard, fast, penetrating rhythms. You know that sound. It's coming from the temple. It's the Temalacatl ceremony. In other words, gladiator fights. But not the Roman kind, the Aztec kind. A prisoner of war stands in the middle of a large stone platform, bound at the wrists, holding a wooden weapon. The warriors facing him are armed with real obsidian knives. It's not fair, is it? Justice is a different concept for the Aztecs. It's about satisfying the gods. Sometimes these fights determine the fate of a prisoner. If he shows extraordinary resistance, which is rare, he may survive. But usually, at the end of the ceremony, blood flows into the temple, and the crowd cheers. This is not entertainment. This is faith. You are watching because you cannot escape. Growing up in this society means learning to normalize blood. Your hands are not yet stained with blood, but everyone knows that day will come. Now it's your turn. You must go to the school beneath the temple, the Calmacac. Yes, there is education. The Aztecs educate their children, but not as you might imagine. Materials? None. Pens and paper? None. What is there? Memorization, discipline, singing, and tests that border on physical torture. Your teacher is a priest. He is called wise, but when you look into his eyes, you see emptiness. He tells you about the nature of the gods, the cycle of the sky, and the calendars. Time is not linear for the Aztecs. It is cyclical. Everything repeats. Everything has its time. Even you. Today's lesson, the Tonalpohualli calendar. It's a 260-day ritual calendar. Each day is controlled by a god. Your birthday belongs to Xiuhtecutli. That's the god of fire. It sounds cool, but it also means anger, burning, and transformation. So in a way, you're troubled. This information is important because every decision you make in your life is connected to this day, this God, and his guidance. It's not a choice, it's destiny. The teacher gives you a task. He tells you to gather flowers for an altar. Only certain flowers, cempasúchil, red hibiscus, and blue foxgloves, because the gods are selective, and the wrong flower is an insult to the wrong god. The price of insult? You know. While gathering flowers, you notice the scribe children on the sidelines. Yes, scribes. The Aztecs write with pictograms. The paper is made from amate wood. The ink comes from ants. The pen? A bird feather. What is written? Wars, sacrifices, agricultural taxes. And one day, your name could be on these inscriptions. That is, if you survive. Afternoon is also the time when courts are held. The Tecutaloyan, a public court, is set up in the central square. Today there is a case. A neighbor's son stole his neighbor's corn. The crime is proven. The punishment? The first offense, public humiliation. Hands are tied behind the back, and the corn sack is struck against the back. If it happens again, the ears are cut off. Worse still, slavery. Aztec law is harsh, because order is sacred. Society is the reflection of the gods. And the gods do not like chaos. You are watching. The crowd is silent. Only the drums and the judge's voice can be heard. Tekwani, he says, you have become a predator. And at that moment, everyone knows. The child is now a slave. His family hangs their heads in shame. No girl will ever marry into that family. Social death. As you walk home, the only thing on your mind is, don't make a mistake. When you get home, the day is almost over, but there is an evening ritual. The whole family walks to the small altar outside the temple. It is one of the holy days. The rain prayers. The priests burn incense, distribute cocoa, and sing hymns. You are kneeling too. The sky is slowly darkening. The lake's surface is turning purple. As the priest prays, it sounds like a rooster crowing in the background. But no, it's not a rooster. It's the cry of the animal that will be sacrificed. Because if it's not a human, an animal is sacrificed. You feel no peace. Because your eyes are on the black bag the priest is carrying. What's in there? A divination bone. Whose future will be read from it? You try not to make eye contact. The ceremony is over, but a message has been delivered. The priest said, Tlaloc was angry this week. A storm is coming. Something must be done. The people murmur. Perhaps there will be a sacrificial ceremony. Perhaps warrior groups will bring prisoners from other tribes. You take a deep breath. Because you made it through this week. But you never know when you'll truly be safe. Because the eyes of the gods are everywhere. And their plan? No one knows. Night falls. You lie in bed. Spiders dance on the ceiling. But there is something else on your mind. Tomorrow's exam. Because on ceremony days at school, students are put through a carrying raw corn exam. You carry corn to the top of a mountain in spiked backpacks. If you succeed, honor. If you fail, humiliation, and maybe something worse. And so another day comes to an end, and you are still alive. As you close your eyes, you hear a sentence. It is your father speaking. Remember, son, to be Aztec is to constantly bargain with God. And sometimes, in that bargain, your heart is laid on the table. And darkness falls. The sun is slowly setting. The sky above Tenochtitlan hangs somewhere between red and purple. The lake's surface reflects the last rays of light like a trembling mirror. But this calm is deceptive, because night is not just a time of rest for the Aztecs. Night means ritual, faith, war, and sometimes death. You are at home. Your mother is lighting a torch. You gather around the fire, the last meal of the day, a few tortillas, some hot peppers, and, if you are lucky, a few pieces of boiled squash. But you have no appetite, because tomorrow is the day you will participate in your first elder sacrifice ceremony. Sacrifice ceremony. When you hear that word, your stomach tightens, but it's not fear. For the Aztecs, sacrifice is more a sign of holiness than fear. Spilling blood is paying a debt to the gods. Living is a debt. Every heartbeat is a receipt for payment. And every day is the day to pay that debt. Tonight's ceremony is a preparation. You are not the main character, but you are close. You will be a spectator in the temple. You will see with your eyes. You will hear with your ears. And if you are unlucky, you will hold it in your hands. When you step outside, the streets are silent. You walk toward the great temple in the center of Tenochtitlan, the Templo Mayor. Torches cast flickering light along the way. The people are silent, but there is an expression on their faces. Devotion. When you reach the temple steps, a crowd has gathered. Priests in white robes hold incense burners. In the background, the slow rise of flute music and the heartbeat rhythm of drums, calling the spirit of the night. The ceremony begins. One of the priests climbs the high steps. He holds an obsidian knife in his hand. Next to him is a man with his eyes blindfolded, a prisoner of war. According to belief, a person captured in battle is the most valuable gift that can be offered to the gods, for with his courage, he has already proven his soul. The crowd falls silent, a final prayer, and the knife descends. Quick, decisive, in accordance with the ritual. The heart is raised toward the sky. At that moment, everyone thinks the same thing. Gods, have you taken it? Are you satisfied? Blood flows onto the marble stones of the temple. But this is not a stain. It is a sacred mark. It is not looked upon with disgust, but with respect. You cannot tear your eyes away. Your legs are trembling, but you cannot run away, because if you run, you will be considered a coward, and cowards, in Aztec society, are neither warriors, nor fathers, nor leaders. They are forgotten. Their history is not even written. The ceremony ends, but the night does not end. The priests conclude the ritual with prayers. As you return home, the sound of drums still echoes in your ears. When you close your eyes, the image of a heart raised to the sky is etched in your mind. But the story does not end here, because in Aztec culture, death is not an end. Death is a transformation, a gateway, a transition from one state of being to another. It's morning. But today is different. Today is Telpochcali, the beginning of the school of war. You are growing up. Childhood is coming to an end. You are about to embark on the path of a warrior. When we say school, don't get the wrong idea. This place is full of fighting. There is no morning yoga or meditation. Instead, there is carving logs with obsidian knives, carrying spears, and fighting simulations with enemy imitations. On the first day, your feet bleed. But no one complains. Pain is just information. If your spirit is still working, you keep walking. The teachers tell you about warrior ideals. The greatest virtue is to be a Coatli, or eagle warrior. They are the most prestigious unit in the army. But getting there isn't easy. You have to bring back 5 prisoners. Yes, prisoners. Alive. Because the gods demand courage, and the way to measure courage is not by killing the enemy, but by capturing them. The second level is Ocelotl, the jaguar warrior. They are one with the night, silent, fierce, deadly. Every movement is a ritual. Every step is sacred. Which one will you be? Time will tell. Weeks pass. You're getting used to it. Your scars are multiplying. Your eyes are less fearful. Your hand grips the obsidian knife more tightly. You no longer avert your gaze during the night ceremonies. And one day, you are taken to your first real battle. Its name is Flower War. Ironic, isn't it? But for the Aztecs, flowers are synonymous with death, because the purpose of these wars is not to gain land. The purpose, to obtain sacrificial prisoners. Going to this war means taking your own death with you. The battle begins. Screams, flutes, drums. A cloud of dust covers everything. You come face to face with an enemy for the first time. Your heart is pounding, but you don't back down. You raise your own knife. But you don't kill, because your mission is to capture. And then the moment comes. The man falls. You pull out the rope and tie his hands. You look into his eyes. He looks at you, and you both know. Your fate is now in the hands of the gods. You return to the city. Your name is called. Applause. But you feel more than pride. You feel a strange emotion. The prisoner is tied behind you. As you walk, he looks at the ground. You look at the sky. One of you will be the sacrifice. The other will be the storyteller. When you return home, your father greets you. For the first time, his eyes are filled with tears. But he does not cry. The Aztecs do not cry, whether in joy or sorrow. Emotions are kept inside, because tears belong to the gods. Night falls, but this time you are not going to the temple. You are staying at home, because a special ceremony is being prepared for you. Your family will give thanks to the gods. You are alive. You owe them. Incense is burned. Cocoa is drunk. Prayers are said. And there is silence. When you look up at the sky, you see something among the stars. It is moving. Perhaps it is a comet. Or maybe it is the corner of a god's eye. You ask the sky, "Will you choose me? Or will you sacrifice me one day?" And the answer is silence. The gears of time, the Aztec calendar, prophecies, and the day of judgment. What day is it? What day of the month? The answers to these questions are not so simple in the Aztec world, because time is not linear for them. It is cyclical. It spins like an endless wheel. Every day is connected to the previous one. Every moment is an echo of the past, and every future is the shadow of a repeating past. You wake up in the morning. There is a slight excitement in the house. Today is Chipactli, according to the Tonalpohualli calendar, that is, the day when creation began. This is not a good or bad day, but it is powerful, and on powerful days, one must be careful. The Aztecs had two main calendar systems. The first was Tonalpohualli, a 260-day sacred calendar. The second was Xiuhpohualli, a 365-day solar calendar. One served the gods, prophecies, and ceremonies. The other served the seasons, agriculture, and society. The Tonalpohualli is a combination system consisting of 13 numbers and 20 days. Each day carries the energy of a god. Every child born is marked with a day from this cycle. That day determines their destiny. What day were you born on? 1. A cattle. Reed day. Teachers say this is the day of leaders, but it is also dangerous, because reeds are easy to bend. They don't break, but they bend. So you must live carefully. Your strength lies in stability. Prophecies are part of daily life. Someone asks a sorcerer before going to the market, "If I buy a chicken today, will it bring blessings or misfortune to my home?" The answer, "Today is 9 Tecpotl, the day of the sword. Don't buy it. It will be cut." For the Aztecs, prophecy is not magic. It is part of logic, because the gods love order, and every order has its rules. Obeying those rules is the only way to survive. But the real issue is the great cycle, because the Aztecs know that this world has an end. In fact, they believe that this world, the fifth sun, is temporary. This world has already been destroyed 4 times. The first sun, it was swallowed by jaguars. The second, it was swept away by hurricanes. The third, it was engulfed in flames. The fourth, it was drowned in water. And now we are under the 5th sun. But this too is not eternal. One day, it will be destroyed by great earthquakes. The world will collapse. The sun will fall. Everything will begin again. And that is why every ceremony, every sacrifice, every prayer, it is not just to honor the gods. It is to keep the sun in the sky. Because the sun does not rise on its own, it must be fed with human blood. Otherwise, it loses its power. It falls, and darkness comes. Every 52 years, 2 calendars coincide. Tonalpohualli and Xiuhpohualli fall on the same day. This is the new fire ceremony. It is a night of fear, anticipation, and rebirth. 52 years, a long life. But when it comes to an end, the people tremble, because no one knows. Will Will the sun rise again? Or has it set for the last time? You are preparing for this special night. All the fires in the city are extinguished. The streets are dark. At the top of the temple, priests gather for a special ceremony. A chosen man's chest is opened, and his heart is removed. A new fire is lit with his blood, and, if the gods are pleased, the sun rises again in the morning. You are witnessing this ceremony. At first, the crowd is silent. Then a little girl starts to cry. Her mother does not silence her, because sometimes fear must be shared. When the sun rises, the whole city shouts. People embrace each other. Fear disappears, replaced by gratitude. But you notice something. The sun rose a little late, the sky was a little darker, and the priests are a little quieter than in other years. It's as if they know. With each cycle, as the end draws nearer, the shadow lengthens. Among the Aztec priests, the most respected are the Tlamatinime. They are wise men. They know not only prayers but also mathematics. They calculate calendars, track the stars, and read the twists of time. One day, one of the Tlamatinime calls you. He shows you a star map. There's a certain line in the sky. Its name is Yolotl, the heart line. He says, "This line is where night and day meet. It is the boundary of the gods. If one day that line disappears, we will disappear too. You grow up. You become a warrior. You see sacrifices. You walk in temples. You hear prophecies. But a part of you keeps asking the same question. Will the apocalypse really come? And the answer is the same every night when you look up at the sky. Not yet. But one day, yes. One day, a prophet addresses the people. There is fire in the sky. Everyone rushes outside. A comet. It's burning in the sky. A long, bright, silent line. Some say, Quetzalcoatl has returned. Others scream, the end has come. At the fairground, there are people crying, praying, and running away. Everyone is asking the same question. Is it now? And the next day? Nothing happens. The sun rises. The birds are singing. But you know, this was a postponement, not a cancellation. The end is always approaching. Years pass. Now you too have become a calendar man. The one who reads the calendar, calculates, and tells people the meaning of the days. People come to you. My child was born on June Kozakate. What does it mean? You answer, the child of the wind. He is talkative, but indecisive. A woman asks, my husband is 12 Alin. I am 4 Tekpotl. Do they match? Your answer, he is movement, you are sharpness. Balance is difficult. But if it happens, it will be great. Sometimes you lie, because sometimes people want hope, not the truth. And here comes another night. You draw a mark on your own wall. The last day of the calendar is approaching. Another 52-year cycle is ending. You go to the temple with incense in your hand. You look up at the sky. This time you're a little older, but you're still asking the same question. Will it rise again? And the sky answers this time too, but very slowly. A bird sings, a baby cries, the sun rises, not yet, but one day, it will. In the shadow of decline, the Spanish conquests and the end of the Aztec civilization. The year is 1519. On the western horizon, sails appear that no one has ever seen before. Men emerge from the ships that have come ashore, their skin pale, their faces stern, their hands holding fire. They have horses. They wear metal armor. Are they gods? Or has death come? Rumors are spreading across Aztec lands. Some say, Quetzalcoatl has returned. Others say, men with black holes in their faces have come. In Tenochtitlan, people are tense. The ruler, Moctezuma, is worried. For today is one of the days marked on the calendar, and the prophecies, They too foretold this. Spanish commander Hernán Cortés is advancing northward from Maya lands toward the Aztec heartland. He is accompanied by several hundred men, a few horses, and tens of thousands of indigenous allies. Yes, the indigenous people, because the Aztecs had imposed heavy taxes, sacrifices, and fear on the surrounding peoples for years. Now those peoples have chosen the enemy of their enemy as their friend. Cortés is clever, diplomatic, ambitious, but also ruthless. His greatest weapon is neither gunpowder nor steel. He is a master of divide and rule. Moctezuma is indecisive, war or peace. Because these newcomers resemble gods, their weapons bring down lightning from the sky. Their horses appear out of nowhere. And worse, prophecies pointed to this year, the year of the reed, the year of Quetzalcoatl's return. Moctezuma sends envoys. He offers golden gifts, but to Cortés, this is only a sign. There is wealth in these lands, and this people, they are afraid. The Spaniards are advancing toward the capital. Along the way, many indigenous leaders join Cortés, the Tlaxcalans, the Kempoalans, even the Otomis. For them, escaping Aztec oppression is worth choosing a foreign master. When they arrive in Tenochtitlan, Moctezuma welcomes them. He hosts them in his palace. He gives gifts. He holds ceremonies. But these are not signs of peace. These are the final acts of history, because Cortés did not come as a guest. He has set his sights on the throne, and in the end, he takes Moctezuma prisoner in his palace. When the people learn of this, they are shocked, but they do not rebel immediately, because the power of these men is unknown. The people try to understand why their ruler did not resist. No one speaks openly. There are only whispers, and this silence is the harbinger of a storm. However, things take an unexpected turn. Cortés leaves to suppress the Spanish rivals remaining on the coast. Pedro de Alvarado is left in charge of the soldiers remaining in the city, and Alvarado carries out a massacre in the name of God. It is the day of the Toxcatl festival. The Aztecs are dancing and praying to the god Huitzilopochtli. Thousands of people have gathered at the temple. Suddenly, the Spaniards draw their swords. The dancers are slaughtered. Blood covers the temple stones. This sparks the uprising. The city rises up. Alvarado and his men are surrounded. Cortés returns, but it is too late. Tenochtitlan does not want him. The people throw stones and spears. While Moctezuma tries to calm the people, a stone hits him in the head. The ruler dies within a few days. This is July 1st, 1520. The Spaniards will remember it as La Noche Triste, the sad night. That night, they flee the city. Thousands die in the narrow canals, in the water, on the rocks, in the fog. Aztec warriors hunt them down in the night. Many drown under the weight of the gold they carry. But this victory is short-lived, for another guest has arrived, silent, invisible, merciless, smallpox. Smallpox, brought by the Europeans, had never been seen on this continent before. The Aztecs had no immunity. The disease spreads. Skin swells. Eyes close. Organs fail. The victims are too numerous to count. Priests pray, but the gods remain silent. Society is collapsing. Temples are abandoned. Warriors fall. Leaders die. Fear no longer comes from the gods. It comes from the microbe. Cortés returns a year later. This time, he is with a larger force. He is better prepared, and the city is now in ruins. There is resistance, but there is no spirit. In the summer of 1521, Tenochtitlan is under siege. Months of fighting, starvation, plague, thirst. The people feed on dead fish in the lake. They drink canal water. Hundreds die every day. Finally, on August 13th, 1521, Tenochtitlan falls. The city is set on fire, temples are destroyed, palaces are razed to the ground, and the Aztec Empire comes to an end. A civilization ends like a day on the calendar, but the sun continues to rise. Only now it has a different name. A new city is founded, Mexico City. New gods arrive, crosses are erected, old beliefs are banned, but roots are not so easily uprooted. Despite the new religion, people still look to the stars. They still feel the cycle of time. Old rituals blend with New Year celebrations. And you, once a conquistador, are now a native. But the past has not been erased, because it still lives in your skin, your language, your dreams. And one day, when someone tells you the Aztecs are gone, you just smile and look up at the sky, because they are still there. As the calendar turns, the wind whispers the name of Quetzalcoatl. The sun rises every morning without the blood of a sacrifice. But you know, a civilization does not die when it is destroyed, but when it is forgotten, and we have not forgotten. Under the sky, the Aztecs' science, cosmology, and understanding of time. From the outside, the Aztecs are always seen as a warrior people. Bloody sacrifice rituals, war booty, terrifying gods. But beneath all this there was something else. An immense power of observation, a talent for calculation, and an obsessive intelligence dedicated to understanding time. Yes, the Aztecs were warriors, but they were also a wise people who read the sky. For them, the universe was not just an empty space, but a text full of meaning, and deciphering that text was a condition of life. Let's take a look at the calendar first. The Aztecs used two basic calendars, the Tonopohualli and the Xiuhpohualli. The Tonopohualli was a sacred calendar of 260 days. It consisted of 20-day periods. Each day had a number and a symbol: jaguar, wind, house, snake, death, flower, and more. Each day had a different character. Some days were suitable for birth, others for funerals. Some days were for dedicating a child, others for prayer. Time was not linear. It had personality. The calendar was not a ruler. It was a living thing. Xiuhpohualli was a 365-day agricultural calendar. It was based on the solar year. This calendar had 18 months, each consisting of 20 days. At the end of the year, 5 days of the dead were added. These 5 days were considered unlucky. People stayed home and remained silent on those days. These two calendars worked together like interlocking gears. Every 52 years, the same combination repeated itself. This cycle was celebrated with the new fire ceremony. Because if 52 years passed without the new cycle beginning, it was believed that the universe would come to an end. Imagine, every 52 years, all the pots are broken, all the fires are extinguished, and the city is plunged into darkness. The priests go up into the mountains. There, a new fire is lit. If the fire catches, the world continues. If it doesn't, everything ends. That's how serious their relationship with time was. For them, history was not a line, but a circle. Everything revolves. Everything repeats. Gods revolve. People revolve. Even the sun demands sacrifices in order to rise again and again. So how were these people able to make such accurate calculations of time? Observation. Aztec priests constantly watched the sky, sunrise, sunset, the positions of the stars. The planet Venus was especially important to them. The rising and setting of Venus, its cycle in the sky. These determined the timing of wars, sacrifices, even marriages. Periods when Venus was not visible were considered unlucky. When it disappeared from the sky, society fell silent. Because the gods were whispering, they had observatories. In present-day Teotihuacan, Even the architecture of the Templo Mayor was aligned with astronomy. The sun rose at a specific angle on the solstice. The shadows were shaped according to the axis of the temple. For them, this was not merely aesthetic, it was universal harmony. If you aligned with the order of the universe, the order would continue. They were also advanced in mathematics. They used a base 20 number system. This was the sum of the hands and feet. Every number from 1 to 20 had a symbol: dots, sticks, shell figures. They used the system to write history and draw architectural plans. What about writing languages? They did not have an alphabet. However, they had pictographic writing, pictograms, ideograms, and phonetic symbols. Codices, manuscripts, were written on deerskin or amate paper. They were folded for storage and read only by priests and educated scribes. These books contained calendars, mythology, agricultural knowledge, sacrificial rituals, and more. Very few codices remain today because most were burned after the Spanish arrived. They were considered idolatry. Yet each one was an encyclopedia. The Aztecs did not neglect medicine either. Their knowledge of plants was advanced. Hundreds of plant species were used as medicine. Some relieved pain, others reduced fever. Priests and shamans also viewed illnesses as spiritual imbalances. The body and soul were one. Surgery was also known. Broken bones were bandaged, and wounds were covered with special ointments. Some plants had anesthetic effects, herbs that stopped blood flow, resins used as antiseptics. Of course, it was not modern medicine, but it was not blind faith either. They read not only the sky but also nature. Agricultural cycles were closely tied to the calendar: planting, harvesting, drought, rain. All were part of the divine order. Ceremonies were held for the rain, god Tlaloc, and children were sacrificed, because children's tears were believed to summon the clouds. This may seem terrifying, but in their eyes, sacrifice was not a punishment, but a contribution to the universe. If the sun rose, there had to be a price to pay, and people paid this price not to the gods, but to the universe. Aztec architecture also reflected cosmology. Pyramids were built with staircases representing the 4 directions. Each direction had its own color, god, and element. North was black, associated with death and night. South was blue, associated with fertility. East was red, the place where the sun rose. West was white, symbolizing sunset. And right in the middle was Tenochtitlan. In the middle of the lake, the center of the universe, a miniature of the divine order, a bridge between the world of humans and the world of gods. That is why, when the Aztecs went to war, they did not fight merely for land. They fought for cosmic balance. When they offered sacrifices, they did not merely appease the gods, they moved time forward. Temples were not just places of worship, they were a kind of calculating machine. The calendar, the sky, sacrifices, and prophecies all were intertwined. That's why, for an Aztec, looking up at the sky wasn't just a romantic gesture. It was a necessity, because the sky was speaking. If you looked closely enough, you could see the future in the alignment of the stars. And you, one day, when you find yourself back in the middle of that world in a dream, you'll look up. A light will appear in the sky. Perhaps it is Venus. Perhaps it is Tonatiuh's eye. And in that moment, you understand. The Aztecs did not just live. They observed, they calculated, they wrote, and they understood time. They did not build the past, they built the cycle, and you are a part of that cycle. The 6th chapter is complete. We have now reached a total of approximately 90,000 characters. Only one chapter remains. The title of the 7th and final chapter could be The Legacy of the Aztecs, From Destruction to Resistance, From Silence to Voice. The Legacy of the Aztecs, From Destruction to Resistance, From Silence to Voice. And now, we have come to the end. But there is no such thing as the end of a people. There are only peoples whose voices are silenced, whose writings are burned, whose memories are buried. The Aztecs were one of those peoples. 1. The fall of Tenochtitlan. It was not a war, it was a massacre. Tenochtitlan was set on fire, temples were destroyed, and the lake was mixed with blood. What was left? Ashes, silence, and a few stone blocks. But among those stone blocks, something remained. Resistance. Silent, deep, and enduring resistance. When the Spaniards arrived, they came with crosses and swords. They sought to change everything: language, religion, tradition. The codices were burned, languages were banned, churches were built with the stones of the temples. The Metropolitan Cathedral was erected over the Templo Mayor. Those stones are still there, like an old memory crushed under the weight of a new faith. The person to be sacrificed was carefully selected. Enemy soldiers captured in battle, slaves, and even volunteers during special festivals. Especially during Tlacaxipehualistli, the bloody festival celebrating spring, a young man was chosen to live like a god for a year. He was dressed, fed, and taught music. And then, at the height of his glory, before he could become a god, his heart was removed. Priests climbing to the top of the temple, wielding obsidian knives called Xucoatl, meaning fiery serpent, would slice open his chest with a single blow, remove his heart, and offer it to the sky. The body would roll down the stone steps. Everything was planned according to a mathematical order, a sacred calendar. This was not just a ritual. It was the continuity of the universal mechanism. The people watching are not silent. They do not cry. For them, this is not murder, but the theater of salvation. Every drop of blood means the sun will rise a little higher. Every heartbeat carries the belief that the earth will yield more corn. Still, deep down, everyone knows. One day, it could be their turn. And the strange thing is, no one flees from this. In Aztec thought, life is a line leading towards sacrifice. The meaning of life is to serve the gods. Death is the pinnacle of this service. That is why war is important, because war means taking prisoners. Prisoners mean sacrifices. Sacrifices mean the world. The Aztecs did not go to war for loot, but to capture the living to offer to the gods. These wars were called flower wars. Yes, flowers, because death was beautiful, aesthetic, and sacred here. What about the priests? They were the enforcers of this order. They never cut their hair and roamed with blood-stained bodies. Their chests were calloused from knife blows, and their hands were constantly covered in blood. But they too were a kind of sacrifice. Because the gods demanded payment for everything. They were the intermediaries, but they were not untouchable. Every year, thousands of hearts stopped beating on the steps of the Templo Mayor. Especially during the Great Sun Festival, days-long sacrifice ceremonies were held, and the number of dead bodies reached hundreds, even thousands. These sacrifices were thrown into the river, and some were dismembered and sent to temples in different regions. All of this was done to maintain the balance of the universe. When Western observers arrived, especially the Spanish conquistadors, they were horrified by the sight. To them, it was barbarism. But what they failed to understand was that this barbarism was the very essence of order in the Aztec universe. The gods demanded human hearts, and the Aztecs offered them every morning. However, for this system to continue, the entire society had to internalize this order. Children watched the sacrifice rituals from a young age, learned the songs, and practiced offering fake hearts in dramatic plays. The most important thing taught in school was honorable death. Dying in battle, being sacrificed, or dying during childbirth, these were the three sacred forms of death, and only one of these deaths would take the soul to heaven. Speaking of heaven, the Aztecs' belief in the afterlife was also quite different. The way you died determined where you would go. Those who died in battle went to Tonatiuh, the sun god. Those sacrificed went directly to heaven. But those who died naturally, the elderly, victims of disease, they went to Mictlan, the darkest region of the underworld. It was a place of oblivion and suffering. For the Aztecs, it wasn't about living a long life. It was about dying the right way. And the right way always involved blood. Now pause for a moment and think. Close your eyes. Imagine Tenochtitlan. You are walking in the shadow of pyramids, rising toward the sky. With every step, you are surrounded by the smell of incense, the cries of those being sacrificed, and the murmur of prayers. And a voice whispers inside you, if you were there, would you run? Or would you walk step by step toward the summit? This is a question not just for the Aztecs, but for all of humanity. Faith or fear? Do you want me to continue? In the next section, we'll delve into the Aztec system of governance, the selection of the Tlatoani, and the palace intrigues. Great. Now we're diving into another dimension of the Aztec world: power, governance, and palace intrigue. Because human sacrifice, temples, and gods were as much a part of Aztec life as the questions of who would sit on the throne, who would make the decisions, and who would rule the people. And the answer to these questions was embodied in a single figure, Tlatoani, meaning the speaker. In Tenochtitlan, every time the sun rose, the empire was ruled not only by the gods, but also by humans. And at the head of this massive organization stood the Tlatoani, a semi-divine figure. The word Tlatoani meant speaker in Nahuatl, but his words were not words that flew in the wind. They were commands that shaped destiny. He was not just a king. He was the representative of the gods on earth. Perhaps the most complex aspect of the Aztec Empire was the regional autonomy that functioned alongside a powerful central authority. So the Tlatoani did not rule directly over everything, but his word carried far and wide. Cities conquered in his name paid taxes and held ceremonies in his honor. And he could declare war, make peace, and even act in the name of the gods. But the throne of the Tlatoani was not easily attained. A king was not born, he was chosen. In the Aztec system, there was a special council that chose the Tlatoani. This council of nobles, composed of the most important families, usually selected a candidate from within the royal family, but the selection was never automatic. Intelligence, courage, diplomacy, and military success. These were essential qualities for becoming king. Competition among the candidates was fierce. Sometimes brothers turned against each other, cousins poisoned one another, and women of the court schemed to promote their sons. Because being Tlatoani was not just about power, it was about becoming a legend. One of the periods when this competition reached its peak was during the reign of Moctezuma I, one of the greatest Aztec rulers. Moctezuma, or Motekuxoma Ilhuicamina, to give him his full name, was not just a king. He was the leader who truly expanded and institutionalized the Aztec Empire. During his reign, conquests increased, a tax system was established, and the number of human sacrifices reached record levels. Tenochtitlan, under his rule, was not just a city, it became a capital, a legend. But this growth did not come easily. Moctezuma first had to overcome internal rivalry within his own family. He rose above his brothers. He then withstood attacks from neighboring cities. And perhaps most importantly, he shaped the spirit of his people with his own hands. During Moctezuma's reign, more temples were built for the gods, more sacrifices were made, and more rituals were held. Because he derived his power not only from military victories, but also from being the representative of cosmic balance. The Tlatoani's palace was befitting of this power, a massive complex. It had hundreds of rooms, secret passages, and walls adorned with gold. It was not only the king who lived here. Advisors, priests, astrologers, warriors, even royal historians, all gathered in this center. This palace was not an administrative building, but a sacred brain. Every move of the empire was directed from here. So, what did the king wear? Feathers. But not just any feathers. Cloaks made from the green feathers of the quetzal bird, gold-embroidered sandals, and headdresses adorned with obsidian mirrors. The king's attire reflected his divine status. He was, in a way, a walking symbol. Everyone who saw him did not see just a man, but the shadow of a god. And of course, the most important duty of the Tlatoani, war. The Aztec king did not just sit on the throne, he wielded a sword on the battlefield, gave orders on the battlefield, and captured enemies. The courage he displayed in battle reinforced his sanctity, because in Aztec thought, it was believed that the gods also fought. Tlatoani was their representative on Earth in this cosmic war. However, this power also meant loneliness. The king had no friends. He only had advisors, watchmen, and servants. Everyone feared his shadow. People knelt before him, and no one dared to look him in the eye. Every word he spoke was recorded, and every decision became a ritual. And the smallest mistake could shatter the empire. The most tragic of the Tlatoani was undoubtedly Moctezuma II. He was on the throne when the Spaniards arrived. His people remembered him as the king who welcomed the return of the gods. However, this encounter would be a turning point that would bring about the end of the Aztec Empire. But we will come to that part in a moment. Now I want to take you into the depths of Aztec bureaucracy, because this civilization was not only built on blood and war, it was also founded on precision, record-keeping, taxes, and law. Yes, the Aztecs kept records, and they were much more detailed than you might think. Okay, in the Aztec world, alongside palaces and wars, there was another silent but powerful network that regulated daily life: the economy, the tax system, and the record-keeping system. And the most interesting part? All of this order functioned without a written language as we understand it. Now close your eyes. You're walking through the streets of Tenochtitlan. On one side, there are market stalls filled with flowers. On the other, colorful, yes. The basic currency of the Aztec economy was the cocoa bean. A cup of cocoa drink was respected as the drink of the aristocracy. But these beans were not just a beverage ingredient, they were a medium of trade. For example, one tomato might be worth 1 bean, while a rabbit could cost 30 cocoa beans. And that's not all. For larger transactions, rolls of cloth called quachtli were also used. In other words, the Aztecs had a complex, symbolic yet effective monetary system. So how did the system work? The key players here were the tax collectors, known as calpixque. Calpixque were responsible for collecting taxes regularly, even from the most remote villages of the empire. The production capacity of each city and region was known: corn, beans, avocados, cloth, obsidian, salt, feathers, and even captives were all submitted as taxes. These goods were recorded, collected in royal warehouses, and distributed as needed. But you said there were no written records, right? This is where the pictographic system comes into play. The Aztecs did not have an alphabet in the modern sense, but they were able to keep incredibly detailed records using symbols and pictures. These documents were kept in foldable booklets called codex. Each codex could be a tax list, a village map, the story of a battle, or a record of a ceremony. Let's say a village paid 200 bags of corn, 15 obsidian knives, and 12 women's garments as taxes each year. In the codex, this would be represented by 200 corn bag symbols, 15 black stone shapes, and 12 figures of women wearing skirts. Numbers were typically represented using dot and bar systems, and yes, these symbols were drawn by professional writers called tranquilo. Some of these codices are still on display in museums today. When you look inside, you see that the Aztecs were not just a bloodthirsty civilization. They were a society that kept archives, built economic systems, and systematically acquired knowledge. They were so systematic that they even had control mechanisms. What if a Kalpixk in a region abused his position? He could be removed from office or even punished. Because taxes were not just for the emperor's wealth, they were a duty to the gods. If they were lacking, it was a big problem. Markets were also institutionalized. The largest market in Tenochtitlan was in Tlatelolco. It attracted approximately 50,000 visitors daily. Yes, you heard that right. 50,000 people shopped at this market every day. There were separate sections for every product: agricultural goods, animal products, handmade items, jewelry, and even slaves. Yes, some people were sold at the market, especially as sacrificial offerings. And this massive market also had a system of oversight. Police-like officials, known as tienquis pan tilamem, maintained order and ensured that trade rules were followed. Did you commit fraud? Sell counterfeit goods? Punishment was immediate, and in some cases, the guilty party was punished right there on the spot, in front of everyone. And of course, there were courts. For the Aztecs, justice was a contribution to the divine order. So a crime didn't just affect the individual, it affected the entire cosmic balance. Each region had its own local courts. More serious cases were referred to the central court in Tenochtitlan. At the highest level, the Tlatoani himself, the king, served as the court of appeal. What were the punishments like? Surprisingly, they were sometimes extremely logical. For example, if a farmer took corn from his neighbor's field without permission, he had to return the exact same amount of corn, no more, no less. However, there were some crimes that were unforgivable: adultery, treason, murder. The punishment was often death. However, there was another interesting detail to the system: the door of repentance. If the guilty party went to the temple before going to court, confessed their crime, and asked for forgiveness, they might be pardoned in some cases. But this was a one-time opportunity. If the same crime was committed again, the punishment was certain. This detail alone shows how systematic the Aztecs were. Balance, ritual, punishment, and forgiveness. All part of the same cycle. And this entire system operated within a society fueled by bloody rituals. Perhaps that is why it was so delicately balanced. They had established order in the midst of chaos. And now, are we nearing the end of this order? Because ships are approaching from afar. Pure white sails, gleaming armor, men swearing oaths in the name of unknown gods. And when these men arrive, the Aztec sun will never rise again as it once did. When you blink, you find yourself on a hot morning in the year 1519. On the shores of the Gulf, shadows falling on the swamps of Xcalanco are slowly growing. Strange structures have appeared on the horizon, white-sailed, tall-masted monsters. For the Aztecs, this was a prophecy come to life, and the man who emerged from those monsters, Hernán Cortés. In the native language, Teotl Tlatoani means the foreigner who comes like a god, and some would describe him as such. But Cortés was no god. He was a sharp-witted, ambitious, and ruthless Spanish commander, and the Aztecs hoped that the only thing that could stop this man was prophecy. But everything in its own time. In 1519, when the Aztecs looked up at the sky, they interpreted Venus's strange movements, the solar eclipses, and the trembling earth. Because their calendar said we had entered a year of transformation, the year of the reed, Seacatl, the time when the legendary god Quetzalcoatl was supposed to return. And at that moment, Cortés was landing in Veracruz and slowly making his way inland. Moctezuma II, in his grand palace in Tenochtitlan, trembled as he heard the news. For he had been taught that Quetzalcoatl would be bearded, fair-skinned, and come from the east. Cortés's descriptions matched this description perfectly. Was it a coincidence, or were the gods truly returning? Moctezuma began to act more like a prophet than a ruler. He sent gifts to Cortés, gold, feathered garments, precious stones. But unknowingly, he made his greatest mistake. For Cortés saw gold, and the lust for gold was a burning poison in the Spanish veins. The first contact was friendly. Cortés's small army formed an alliance with local groups like the Tlaxcala and Totonac, who hated the Aztecs. Why? Because the Aztecs had forced these people to pay taxes, participate in a sacrifice system, and submit to their rule for centuries. For the Tlaxcalans, Cortés was a savior. Ironically, but true. November 1519, Cortés and his 600 soldiers, along with thousands of indigenous allies, reached Tenochtitlan, and there they found a ghostly city floating on water. Tenochtitlan, with its size, order, temples, and rivers, stunned Cortés. He would later write to his king, "No European city is as orderly or as magnificent as this." Moctezuma welcomed Cortés into his palace. He greeted him like a god. He gave him gifts of gold. He took him to the temples. But this was not peace. It was a waiting game. For 2 months, Cortés lived as Moctezuma's guest, but in reality, he was observing. He studied the city's structure, the army, the people, and then he made a plan. One night, he arrested Moctezuma in his palace. Yes, the Aztec emperor was now a prisoner. He was silent. He told his people not to resist the Spaniards, and at that moment, the empire began to crumble. But things did not go as planned, even for Cortés. Unrest was growing in Tenochtitlan. The Spaniards' entry into the temples and their touching of sacred objects enraged the people. In May 1520, Spanish commander Alvarado massacred thousands of Aztec nobles during the Tlaxcatl festival. The temple was filled with blood. This sparked the rebellion. The Aztecs rose up. The city turned into a battlefield. Cortés tried to escape. Moctezuma was stoned to death while trying to calm his people. He was killed by his own people. Perhaps the Aztecs accused him of treason. Perhaps he had simply become a figure from the distant past. The Spaniards fled Tenochtitlan in a sea of blood, mud, and anger. That night would be called La Noche Triste, the sad night. Hundreds of Spaniards and thousands of indigenous allies were killed. Cortez was nearly killed. But this was not the end. Cortez would return, stronger, more ruthless, and this time determined to achieve his goal, to destroy Tenochtitlan. Summer 1521. Cortez, alongside his former enemies, the Tlaxcalans, besieged Tenochtitlan. They cut off the city's water supply. Disease spread. Smallpox, an enemy to which the Aztecs had no immunity, claimed thousands of lives in a matter of days. Bodies were thrown into the lakes, contaminating the water sources. Starvation, plague, despair. And finally, on August 13th, 1521, Tenochtitlan fell. A centuries-old empire was reduced to rubble, with not a single stone left standing. Temples were destroyed. Statues of gods were toppled. Obsidian knives were defeated by iron swords. But the most tragic part? The dream of a people collapsed. Tenochtitlan was not just a city. It was the center of a universe, the heart of a cosmic order. And now it was nothing but ruins. Cortez declared Aztec lands New Spain. The gods were gone, churches came, puppets were put in place, and within a few years, even the language, writing, and music of this ancient civilization began to be banned. But strangely, the Aztecs did not disappear completely, because culture is as unbreakable as stone, especially rituals, stories, and names. Today, the Nahuatl language is still spoken in Mexico. Many place names date back to the Aztec period. The eagle figure on the Mexican flag is based on the founding myth of the legendary Tenochtitlan. So the Aztecs did not disappear. They simply learned to live in the shadows. Now we have come to the end. But perhaps we are only at the threshold of the modern world. When you open your eyes, we are now in a completely different place, beyond war and conquest. The battle-scarred stones of Tenochtitlan may have turned into piles of rubble, but the ideas behind them still stand tall. Today, we will look at the Aztecs' invisible weapons, their intellectual, scientific, and spiritual heritage, because these people were not just warriors, priests, or sacrifices. They were a people who measured the sky, tried to bend time, and aligned their city with the stars. And if you are looking for a compass for today's civilizations, perhaps the first place you should look is the Aztec calendar. If you're ready, let's begin. Time may be a straight line for us, but for the Aztecs, time was a circle, a divine circle that constantly rotated, repeating itself, with no beginning and no end. And within this circle danced two sacred time systems, Tonalpohualli, a 260-day sacred calendar, Xiuhpohualli, a 365-day agricultural ceremonial calendar. Tonalpohualli was the calendar that determined an individual's destiny from birth to death. 13 numbers and 20-day signs cyclically came together, with each combination representing a god, a spirit, or an energy. So, the day you were born, the god under whose influence you were, determined your character, your luck, and even the manner of your death. Did you say astrology? The Aztecs used a much more refined version of this centuries ago. Kings ascended the throne according to this calendar. Wars were launched based on it. Weddings, ceremonies, and sacrifices were all aligned with this cycle. What about Xiuhpohualli? It was a calendar that tracked the seasons of the world, regulating agriculture, festivals, and the cycles of nature. It consisted of 18 months, each 20 days long. 5 dead days were added to this, the Totantli. These 5 days were considered unlucky. No important work was done, and people stayed indoors, because on these days, the gods withdrew from the earth and chaos reigned. And every 52 years, these two calendars align. They coincide with the same starting day. This astronomical alignment was called the New Fire Ceremony. For the Aztecs, This marked the end of the universe, or the point of rebirth. On that night, all fires are extinguished. The entire city is shrouded in darkness. Then, on the summit of a mountain in the valley of the volcanoes, a sacred sacrifice is made. The victim's chest is slit open, and their heart is offered. And if the gods decide to continue the world, a priest ignites the new sacred fire burning in the victim's chest, and this flame slowly spreads throughout the entire empire. The universe is reborn. So yes, the Aztecs did not merely count time, they revered it, negotiated with it, and lived according to its rhythm. What about the sky? The Aztecs tracked Jupiter, Venus, and Mars with the naked eye. At night, they considered the Pleiades star cluster, visible even to the naked eye, sacred, because these stars were the celestial sign of the new fire ceremony. But there was one planet in particular that the Aztecs had deified, Venus. In their language, it was called Tlahuizcalpantecutli, meaning dawn god. The rising and setting of Venus determined rituals, wars, and prophecies. In some periods, Venus was seen as a bad omen, and wars were started. Kings consulted their advisors and decided on sacrifices based on these cycles. So astronomy was not just a decoration, but a strategy for survival. And the best part? They didn't just observe. Even the city planning of Tenochtitlan was based on this celestial order. Tenochtitlan, 2 large towers, one dedicated to the rain god Tlaloc, the other to the god of war and the sun, Huitzilopochtli. The alignment of these towers ensures that the sun aligns perfectly with those points on specific days of the year. The sky and architecture are intertwined. This is not just a temple. It is a clock, a compass, a model of the universe. Even the layout of the settlement was organized according to the concept of the sacred 4 directions: North Mictlan, death; South Huitztlampa, war; East Tlapan, dawn; West Tsihuatlampa, ancestors and female spirits. So, for an Aztec, walking through the city was like coming face to face with the gods, and this made them as practical as it did mystical, because this order also meant efficient agriculture, regular transportation, centralized government, water channels, and even control over hygiene. But perhaps one of the most fascinating aspects was medicine. For the Aztecs, health was the balance between body and spirit. Priest healers practiced both physical treatment and spiritual purification. They were highly advanced in their knowledge of plants. Over 100 plants used today in modern pharmacology have been documented as being used by the Aztecs. Opium flowers for painkillers, leaves with antibacterial properties, juices for stomach problems. Additionally, they employed bone-setting techniques for fractures, resins for wound sterilization, and even plants to alleviate labor pains. When a woman gave birth, she was assisted by midwives and praying priestesses. This was as much a spiritual event as it was physical, as the birth of a new life was seen as a victory offered to the gods. But of course, there were also dark sides to medicine. Mental illnesses were often seen as divine curses and were sometimes treated with shamanic rituals or sacrifices. Thus, Aztec medicine was a strange blend of the modern and the mystical. Now consider this. These people read the sky. They shaped time. They built their architecture according to the stars. They constructed their cities with symmetry. They extracted their medicines from nature and viewed illnesses not just as physical conditions, but as spiritual states. Were they primitive? Or were they part of a complex system that transcended their time? Perhaps there are still things for modern science to learn there, in the shadow of the pyramids rising from the swamps. And the most shocking part? all this scientific order existed within a belief system, a world that bargained with gods, spoke to the stars, and balanced the universe with sacrifices. This is how the Aztecs lived, and this was their true legacy, not stone temples, an understanding of the universe that operated in an endless cycle. We have built an empire up to this point, walked its streets, prayed to its gods, lived by its calendar, and listened to its laws shaped by blood and sky. But now, the Aztecs' day is coming to an end. A civilization. How does it end? The answer is not simple. Because the Aztecs did not disappear overnight. They first fell to the ground. Then they turned to dust. Then that dust mixed with the soil of a country. And the name of that soil is today, Mexico. In this final chapter, we will explore how the Aztecs were truly destroyed, how Europe crushed them, and how they still live today. Because the story is not over, it has merely changed form. The year is 1519. The shadow of the Renaissance stretches across Europe. Art, science, and navigation are booming. Spain is seeking wealth beyond the continent, and a man named Hernán Cortés sets sail from Cuba with 500 soldiers. His destination is an unknown land promising riches, the New World. He carries weapons, horses, and steel armor, but he also carries something far more dangerous, the smallpox virus. This microscopic enemy would become the most effective weapon to bring down the Aztec Empire. But no one knew that yet. Cortés meets Moctezuma. The emperor receives him in his palace and presents him with gifts. But Cortés is not seeking diplomacy. He is seeking a plan, and eventually, he arrests Moctezuma. When the Aztec people hear that their king has been taken captive, a rebellion breaks out in the city. Cortés flees, but he returns with a larger army and more indigenous allies, and in 1521, Tenochtitlan falls after a 75-day siege, but not by war, by disease, by starvation, by despair. Smallpox spreads so rapidly through the city that thousands die each day. The bodies cannot be burned. They rot in the streets. The stench is unbearable. Priests collapse while praying, and finally, the once mighty Aztec capital is conquered. The Aztecs surrender. Tenochtitlan is destroyed. A new city is built. Its name, Ciudad de Mexico. Yes, today's Mexico City was built on the ruins of the Aztec capital. And this is where the real question begins. What happened next? Did the Aztecs disappear? Number. Their stories were not buried. They were simply told in a different language. When Cortés reaches the Mexican coast, the first indigenous people he encounters, the Totonacs, ally themselves with the Spaniards to escape their Aztec enemies. This is the first crack. Other Aztec enemy cities, such as Tlaxcala, soon join Cortés. Cortés is not just a conqueror, he is a manipulator, an actor, a strategist, and eventually he reaches Tenochtitlan. I want to stop you here, because this is very important. Do you know what Cortés felt when he first saw the Aztec capital? He was overcome with tears, because what he saw did not exist in any city in Europe. Islands rising from the middle of a lake, thousands of buildings, temples, canals, stone bridges. Everything was in harmony. It was beyond even Venice. But this admiration did not last long, because gold was more appealing, and Cortés decided to overthrow the gods to get the gold. The Aztecs initially believed that the first arrivals were divine beings. In their legends, there was a bearded god named Quetzalcoatl. It was said that he would return from the east. Cortés' arrival coincided with this prophecy. This misinterpretation would bring an end to a 1,000-year-old civilization. The Spanish eradicated the Aztec religion. They destroyed the temples. They slaughtered the priests. They banned the sacrificial ceremonies. They brought a new religion, Christianity. But the people, they didn't change, because true faith resides in the heart, and no armor can strip the God from the heart. Aztec symbols were hidden within Catholic iconography. Aztec goddesses infiltrated the Virgin Mary. Rituals were renamed, but they remained the same. For example, Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead. This holiday, still celebrated in Mexico today, is a direct continuation of the Aztec cult of the dead. Colorful skeletons, eating in cemeteries, connecting with ancestors. These practices stem from the Aztecs' unique relationship with death. Even the Aztec Cihuateteo, the spirits of women who died in childbirth, have transformed into today's La Llorona legend. The Aztecs left such a mark that we live with it today without even noticing. Just like the Nahuatl language, today, over 1.5 million people in Mexico still speak Nahuatl. Guacamole, avocado, chocolate, tomato. All of these words have Nahuatl origins, so the Aztec language is still present on our tables today. But the story doesn't end there, because this legacy isn't just in words or rituals, it lives on in the spirit of an entire nation. Look at the modern Mexican flag. In the center, an eagle holds a snake in its beak, perched on a cactus. Do you know where this image comes from? From an Aztec prophecy. The Aztecs believed that their god Huitzilopochtli would give them a sign, an eagle with a snake in its beak, landing on a prickly pear cactus. There they would build their city. And indeed, Tenochtitlan was built exactly where that image appeared. Today, this mythology remains the symbol of the Mexican Republic, so the Aztecs did not disappear. They were engraved in the heart of the nation. And now, in 2025, as you watch this video, something happened. You felt as if you were touching the bones of a young warrior, sacrificed 1,000 years ago. Because his story is still being told. Because prayers are still heard beneath the Templo Mayor. Because the stars still rise from the same place. And because you tried to understand the Aztecs. They were not just a civilization. They were a people who bargained with the universe. A community that opened their chests to the sun, offered their hearts to the gods, and feared not death. And perhaps they taught us the greatest lesson. Time passes, stones crumble, but ideas, they live on. And now you are part of this story. When you look at the stars at night, one of them might wink at you. Who knows? Perhaps it is still Tezcatlipoca, watching you, just like in the old days. As the sun danced across the sky, a new day, a new sacrifice, and a new hope dawned for the Aztecs. But this hope could only be sustained by the will of the gods. The gods were insatiable, greedy, and their satisfaction could only be achieved through human blood. Now let's delve a little deeper. Let's talk about another structure located in the dark lower layers of Tenochtitlan, in the shadow of the Templo Mayor, called the Tlalnepantli. This was a tower made of wooden cages erected on stone platforms, where the skulls of the sacrificed were displayed. Each one was a silent witness to a past ceremony, to a life that had been taken. Hundreds, even thousands of skulls were stacked here, facing the sky as an offering to the gods. This sight may seem terrifying to modern eyes, but for them, it was a form of worship. It was also a clear message to enemies. You cannot stop us. But were only war prisoners sacrificed? Number among the sacrifices were sometimes volunteers, especially during festivals like Tlacaxipehualistli. Young men were chosen as the gods' representatives on earth, lived in luxury for a year, and then willingly offered themselves to the gods. For them, the end of the mortal body was the beginning of union with the divine. And after these sacrificial ceremonies, the city would breathe again. Incense would be burned, music would be played, people would flock to the squares, and celebrations lasting for days would begin. These celebrations were not only religious, but also social events. People would find mates, community ties would be strengthened, and trade would flourish. Sacrifice was like insurance for the continuity of life. Fear and hope coexisted within the same ceremony. Now, let's move on to a slightly more unusual Aztec belief, Tonalpohualli. This was the Aztecs' sacred calendar. It was a 260-day cycle that regulated both religious and individual lives. Each day was dedicated to a god, and everyone carried a destiny based on the day they were born. So the day you were born was not just a date, but also a map of your future. For example, those born on one house day were considered patient but introverted. Those born on Seven Flower Day were inclined towards art and music. People acted according to the harmony of these days when they got married, started a job, or even went to war. As you can see, for the Aztecs, the universe was a perfectly functioning clock. Everything had to be in harmony with time, the gods, and the cycles. And the gears of this clock were set by sacrificial rituals, calendar calculations, and the movements of celestial bodies. Every sunrise was a sign that these gears were turning correctly. But one day, those gears would stop. And that moment of stillness began in 1519, when Spanish ships reached the shores of Mexico. And now, Hernán Cortés steps onto the stage of history. This Spanish commander, who landed in Veracruz in 1519, was accompanied by around 100 soldiers, a few horses, and a motivation that would change the fate of a continent shrouded in mystery, gold, victory, and exploration in the name of God. However, he did not know exactly what lay ahead. Neither he nor his men had ever imagined something like Tenochtitlan. Neither the palaces of Madrid nor the cathedrals of Seville could rival the grandeur of this city. Cortés's advance caused great turmoil in the Aztec world, for the arrival of these foreigners was associated with one of the gods from the legends, Quetzalcoatl. Quetzalcoatl was a bearded, fair-skinned god believed to return one day from the east. When Cortés and his men first landed on the shore, the echoes of this prophecy resonated in the ears of the people. Some historians suggest that this is why Montezuma initially adopted a passive stance. The idea that those before him might be connected to the gods was more dangerous than going to war. However, this notion quickly evaporated in the face of the Spaniards' ruthless advance. Cortés first formed alliances with the Aztecs' enemies. He forged partnerships with communities like the Tlaxcalans, who had lived under Aztec rule for years. These communities, who had been taxed by the Aztecs, had their children sacrificed and their lands taken away, saw Cortés's arrival as a chance for freedom. And so, Spanish swords and native spears joined forces. When Cortés reached Tenochtitlan, the city appeared to them like a miracle. Surrounded by canals, built on hills, and shining like a pearl in the middle of a lake, this settlement was a marvel of civilization. However, this admiration quickly gave way to bloodshed and betrayal. In 1521, as the great Tenochtitlan fell, the sky was still blue. The lake still lapped at the shores. But the city, it was now a ruin. Cortés and his army destroyed the Aztec Empire, leaving no stone unturned. The Templo Mayor was demolished, and Christian churches were built in its place. The gods were silently buried, Tzompantli was destroyed, and the time of the Aztecs came to an end. But the story doesn't end here, because the Aztecs always believed in the cycle of time. Every end was a new beginning, and even today, the echoes of that cycle can still be heard. Cortez visited Montezuma in his palace. Sources describe this encounter as taking place in an odd silence. While Montezuma tried to understand the power of the visitors, Cortez sought opportunities to assert his dominance. Soon, Montezuma was taken captive, but this was not with chains, but with a symbolic siege. The Aztecs could no longer freely see their god's representative. They felt his decisions in Cortez's shadow. And then, the conflict erupted. When the people of Tenochtitlan realized that Montezuma had become a puppet, the rebellion began. The canals were filled with battles, houses were burned, temples destroyed. The Spaniards temporarily withdrew from the city, but this was only the calm before the storm. When Cortez returned, he brought with him more soldiers, more weapons, and his deadliest ally, the smallpox virus. Yes, the weapons could kill the Aztecs, but the viruses devastated them. These microscopic invaders from Europe ravaged an unsuspecting people. Corpses littered the streets. Prayers were said. Sacrifices increased, but the gods remained silent. The sky no longer thundered. The sun no longer sent messages. This silence was a sign that the end was near. As the sun set, the sky over Tenochtitlan turned orange and shadows danced on the temple steps. The city continued to live on, never losing its rhythm, even as another day came to an end. But in the midst of all this splendor, a shadow loomed over the Aztec world, a shadow approaching from beyond the Atlantic Ocean: the Spanish. In 1519, Hernán Cortés and his men set foot on the shores of Mexico. With them came unknown weapons, unknown diseases, and unknown intentions. Though the first encounters seemed friendly, this discovery journey quickly turned into an invasion. And the Aztecs were slow to understand this new threat. Cortez's army, though small, had deadly advantages: steel swords, firearms, and most importantly, the ability to manipulate the discontent that had been building among the indigenous peoples for years. The Tlaxcalans, Totonacs, and other communities were unhappy with Aztec rule. Cortez skillfully exploited these internal divisions. Many indigenous people realized too late that they were aiding their own executioners. And there was another enemy the Aztecs did not know how to deal with: smallpox. This deadly virus brought by the Spaniards became an invisible catastrophe for the Aztecs. Warriors, priests, farmers, all were left to face fragile bodies and a lack of medical knowledge. The population suffered millions of deaths within a few years. Cities fell silent. The gods did not respond to these silent cries. However, the destruction of Tenochtitlan was not merely physical. It was also a cosmological collapse. For the Aztecs, the world was based on a series of sacred balances. The rising of the sun was a debt paid in blood. The moon's rotation was a silent pact with the gods. But these newcomers did not adhere to any of these rules. They offered no sacrifices and showed no respect for the temples. To them, the pyramids were just stone, and the gods were just statues. This was a nightmare for the Aztecs. The cosmos was shattering, and the gods watching over them were either silent or angry. In 1521, Tenochtitlan fell. After months of siege, starvation, disease, and betrayal, the city was buried in mud. Lakes were stained with blood. Temples were destroyed, and no stone was left standing. The once golden city was now a graveyard of ash and mud. But the Aztecs were not completely annihilated. Some fled to the forests, others to the mountains. Others submitted to the conquerors, but refused to surrender their spirits. They passed down their traditions, gods and stories in whispers to future generations. Huitzilopochtli no longer roamed the altars, but the dreams. Tlaloc's tears were no longer raindrops, but the tears of his people. But they were still there. Their stories were still being told. Today, the echoes of the Aztecs can still be heard in the streets of modern Mexico. The Nahuatl language is still spoken. The eagle on the cactus still proudly adorns the country's flag. And every year on Dia de los Muertos, the bridge built between the living and the dead reminds us of the Aztecs' belief in the thin line between life and death. Because for them, death was not an end. It was a new beginning. So, when you wake up in the morning and the steam from a warm tortilla hits your face, perhaps that steam carries the breath of a warrior who once sacrificed his heart to feed the sun. Perhaps the sudden wind in a crowded square is the flapping of Quetzalcoatl's wings. Who knows? Perhaps they are still alive. In the world they were thought to have long since vanished, watching us without our knowing. And now, close your eyes. Imagine climbing the steps of the Templo Mayor. The sun beats down on your forehead. Below, thousands of people stand in silence. The high priest awaits you, in his hand an obsidian knife. For today, they will use your heart to make the sun rise once more. The Aztecs may never return, but their stories will be reborn every day with the sun, like an unfinished ceremony. And so, we listened to the last breath of the Aztec world together. Now, whatever remains of that world lives on in the stones, the soil, and our imagination. But pause for a moment. Imagine that the asphalt beneath your feet was once an altar stone. Imagine that the skyscrapers you see were once stepped pyramids. And see the echoes of those who prayed to the god Tlaloc in the faces of the people you meet on the subway in the morning. Because history does not disappear, it only changes form. The Aztecs may have fallen as a civilization, but as an idea, as a narrative, they are still with us. They are still in our dreams, in our art, even in our language. Words from Nahuatl are still spoken. Chocolate, tomato, tomato, avocado. Their sounds linger on our tongues, their spices are in our food, and perhaps their courage lives on within us. You watched this video, listened to it, and maybe you were surprised. Maybe you were even moved. But remember this: the Aztecs once believed that they ruled the world with their hearts, and maybe they were right, because their story still resonates in our hearts. If you enjoyed this journey and want to discover the stories of other times and other civilizations, don't forget to subscribe. But only if you truly enjoyed it. Because this channel will continue to tell stories of history like a horror,